Her adult son told her the wrong parent died, and then asked if she'd bought almond milk. Elaine Voss, a widowed mother and retired homeowner, didn't argue. She called her lawyer. By the time Caleb and his live-in girlfriend Jenna realized the mortgage was in Elaine's name alone, the electricity had already been shut off. They begged. She packed. She'd raised a son, not a dependent, and when he showed up at her new door, the concierge sent him back into the rain. All right, before we dive into this crazy story, do me a favor. Subscribe and tell us where you're watching from. The lasagna was still steaming in the center of the table, untouched, its scent heavy with oregano, and something more bitter now, something human. Elaine reached for her water glass without looking up, her hand steady, though her pulse had started a slow, irregular thump somewhere deep in her chest. Caleb had said it like he was commenting on the weather. No inflection, no heat, just cold delivery. The wrong parent died first. It didn't register at first. Or maybe it did, but Elaine's brain refused to wrap itself around the shape of it. The sentence hung in the air like smoke, acrid, undeniable, time fractured just slightly. The scrape of Jenna's fork against her plate sounded too loud, the click of the wall clock too fast. Jenna blinked twice, then gave a too bright laugh. So, did you see that article I sent you, Elaine? About that new neighborhood walking club? Thought you might like it. Elaine turned her head slowly, not toward Jenna, not toward Caleb, but to the far window where the late autumn dusk was settling like a bruise over the lawn. The house, her house, was unnaturally quiet. She didn't speak, didn't move, just sat there, her back straight, eyes distant, hands folded lightly on the edge of the tablecloth Caleb's wife had insisted on buying, the one that didn't match anything else in the room. Caleb stabbed a piece of lasagna and brought it to his mouth with theatrical nonchalance, chewed, swallowed. Well, it's true, he added, as if he were clarifying a weather report. Dad would have handled all this better. You know it. Elaine stood, not quickly, not with the kind of fury he might have expected or hoped for. She pushed back her chair with both hands and rose with the quiet elegance of a woman who had once taught teenagers how to read Shakespeare without laughing. Her face was unreadable, not frozen, composed, and that made it worse. She gathered her plate, still half full, and carried it to the sink, ran the water, washed it, dried it, placed it gently in the dish rack. Neither of them said a word. When she turned, her eyes met Jenna's for a flicker of a second. The younger woman gave a small, tense smile, like she still thought this would blow over by dessert. Elaine said nothing. Caleb didn't look at her at all. She walked down the hall, her shoes silent on the polished wood floor she and her husband had installed themselves 25 years ago. Every footstep felt deliberate now, weighted with decision. She reached the door to his office, still marked with the little bronze nameplate she'd bought him the year he retired. Michael Voss, Ph.D. Solutions, not problems. Elaine hadn't opened that door in months. The knob turned easily. Inside, the air was cooler, stale with disuse and faintly leathery from his old reading chair. Nothing had been moved. Not the desk lamp with the cracked shade, not the half-used legal pad in his firm, square handwriting, not the file cabinet. She crossed to it and opened the bottom drawer. The documents were right where he'd left them, labeled, tabbed, sorted with military precision: mortgage, deed, power of attorney, joint savings, pension. Her name was on every line that mattered. She pulled out one manila envelope, then another. Her hands didn't shake, her breath stayed level. But her heart was beginning to move differently now, like something ancient waking up inside her ribcage. There was no noise from the kitchen. For a long moment, Elaine stood there in the dim light of the office, staring down at the paper trail of her life. Their life. All the things Caleb had ignored. All the things Jenna assumed were hers. She reached over and clicked on the lamp. Its amber glow lit the surface of the desk like a stage. She began to read. The next morning, Elaine made coffee the way she always had. Strong, black, no cream, no sugar. Caleb liked hazelnut creamer. Jenna used oat milk and collagen powder. Neither was up yet. Good. She took her mug to the sunroom. What used to be the back library before Jenna replaced the shelves with oversized houseplants and Instagrammable throw pillows. Now it smelled like eucalyptus and new paint instead of dust and memory. The walls, once a rich navy blue, were now beige. Jenna had called it modernizing. Elaine had said nothing at the time. That had been her mistake, saying nothing. She looked around slowly, eyes landing on every object Jenna had, introduced like subtle declarations of ownership, a ceramic "home is where the heart is" sign on the mantel, wicker baskets filled with fake lemons, a round, frameless mirror that replaced the portrait of her and Michael from their 35th anniversary. Not once had she been asked, not once had Caleb intervened. She sipped her coffee. It had gone lukewarm, but she didn't flinch. That sentence, the one Caleb had tossed across the dinner table like a grenade, had detonated something inside her. Not rage, not grief, something cleaner, sharper, a calm refusal to be erased. She thought of the months after Michael died. Caleb had offered for her to stay as long as she needed. Jenna had nodded too quickly, and Elaine had, at the time, been too raw to challenge any of it. She'd paid the utilities, groceries, fixed the roof, bought Caleb a new laptop when his fried, lent Jenna money for a certification course she never finished. She'd given, quietly, because that's what mothers do. But grief, it turns out, isn't a hole you fall into. It's a tunnel, and sometimes there's light on the other side. This morning, the light was piercing. She went upstairs to the attic, careful to avoid the fourth step from the top. It always creaked. The storage bins were still neatly labeled in her handwriting: tax records, photos, jewelry, Michael's files. One by one, she opened them. Took what mattered: a ring box here, a few folders, her birth certificate, a flash drive, the deed. She placed them gently into a sturdy leather bag she hadn't used in years. No noise, no drama. She'd learned long ago the most powerful people in any room were usually the quietest. Caleb and Jenna could argue all they wanted. She wasn't here to argue. Back downstairs, she checked the clock. Almost 9. Caleb would shuffle out soon in his sweatpants, still somehow sleepy despite having no real job, asking if she'd seen his charger. Jenna would appear later, smelling like dry shampoo and entitlement, holding a smoothie in one hand and her phone in the other. Elaine walked to the hall closet and opened the safe. Combination still the same. She pulled out her passport, her late husband's investment portfolio binder, and a velvet envelope containing their wedding bands. Then something small and final, her own set of spare keys. She placed those on the entryway table. Let them wonder. She returned to the kitchen, washed her coffee mug, and dried it thoroughly. It wouldn't go in the dishwasher, not in this house. Not anymore. Back in her room, she pulled a yellow legal pad from her nightstand drawer and began writing. Not a letter, not a confession, but a checklist. Her handwriting remained crisp and slanted, unchanged from her years as a teacher. The first item read, "Secure storage unit." Second, "Change legal beneficiaries." A quiet smile played at the corners of her mouth. Not joy, not malice, certainty. Downstairs, she heard the slow creak of the kitchen chair. Caleb, right on schedule. Elaine folded the list and slid it into her purse, already half-packed with files and silent warnings. She opened her bedroom window just an inch. The air outside smelled like frost and wood smoke. Winter was coming early this year, and this time, it wouldn't be waiting for anyone. Elaine sat at the old roll-top desk in her room, the one Caleb had once suggested she donate to make space. Funny how that desk was now the command center for his undoing. A yellow legal pad sat open before her, columns already forming. Dates, amounts, due balances. Each line she wrote added structure to the clarity blooming inside her like something long overdue. The numbers weren't new. She'd always known them. But this time, she saw them differently. This time, they had weight. The mortgage payment, $2,196.42 per month. Not a cent from Caleb, not once. Electric, average $287. Water, $71. Internet, groceries, insurance, landscaping, all hers. And the gall of it. Jenna changing the Wi-Fi name to Casa Caleb Jenna without asking. Elaine flipped open the manila folder she'd pulled from the safe. Her husband's handwriting was there, sharp and deliberate. He'd built this entire system so she'd never be left scrambling. She had tried not to touch it while mourning, but now she flipped through the pages with a steady hand, as if drawing a map toward something clean and final. The house was entirely in her name. Michael had made sure of that. "If something happens to me, Elle," he'd said, not long before the surgery, "you'll have everything you need to move how you want, not how they want." She reached for the phone. A quiet beep, a short menu, then a live voice. "First United Bank, this is Carla. How can I assist you today?" Elaine kept her tone neutral. "I'd like to discuss the current mortgage balance and title holder status for 223 Meadowview Lane." "Certainly," Carla said, typing. "Can I verify your identity first?" Elaine rattled off the answers calmly. SSN, birth date, passcode phrase. "The raven flies at dusk." Michael had picked it. He always loved Poe. "Thank you, Ms. Voss. I see the property here. Mortgage current, no outstanding penalties. Balance remaining, $67,341. Elaine nodded, though no one could see her. "I'd like a breakdown of what would happen if I removed myself from the payment stream." Carla hesitated. "Well, ma'am, if the loan remains unpaid and you walk away without refinancing or transferring title, the burden would fall on the remaining residents. They'd be responsible for full monthly payment and risk foreclosure." "No return policy then?" Elaine said softly. "I'm sorry?" Elaine smiled. "Nothing. That's perfect." She ended the call with polite efficiency, then opened her laptop. A few clicks, a secure login, and her pension account appeared. Solid. Untouched. She moved half of it, $84,000, into a newly created account labeled with a random string of numbers and no paper trail to the house. If Caleb tried to claim elder exploitation, there'd be nothing to find. She had funded her own life down to the dime, and she'd left digital footprints showing exactly when that shifted. She sat back, took a deep breath, and stared at the account balances. Freedom wasn't a feeling. It was a formula. Her phone buzzed. A text from Jenna. "Do we have almond milk? Caleb says he's out and needs it for his protein shake." Elaine didn't reply. She picked up her phone and opened a fresh memo. Step 3. Call lawyer. Title freeze. New executor. Then, Step 4. Research storage units. She closed her laptop and reached for the velvet pouch sitting in her drawer, the one holding her husband's old money clip, the one he only used on vacations. Inside was a check he'd never deposited, made out to him from an old client, $1,200. She smiled. They thought she'd cling to this house like a lifeline, but grief had been a storm, and now she was the tide that followed it, pulling everything back in her favor. Outside, the wind picked up, rustling the oak leaves in the yard. One broke free and smacked against the window, then slid down, slow and deliberate. Elaine stood and pulled the curtain closed. They were going to feel it soon. Elaine sat in the high-back leather chair across from the polished walnut desk, her hands folded loosely in her lap. The conference room smelled faintly of lemon oil and ambition. Framed degrees from Yale, Georgetown, and Stanford lined the wall behind Martin Glassman, escorso, a man whose suits always looked custom and whose silence cost $400 an hour. He stared at her across his tortoise-shell reading glasses. "You're absolutely certain?" Elaine didn't blink. "Yes." He let out a low whistle and turned back to his computer. The clack of keys was clean and efficient. "Well then," he murmured, "let's start with the will." Elaine had called the day before with a calmness that unnerved even the receptionist. "I'm updating my estate. I'd like everything ready within 72 hours. No questions, no explanations, just the kind of resolve that made legal professionals sit up straighter. Now, with her glasses perched low on her nose, Elaine read every line Martin drafted like a surgeon checking for a pulse. She removed Caleb's name from everything: real estate, cash assets, vehicles, life insurance, even the backup emergency contact line. Jenna had never been on it to begin with. She replaced them with a single name: Alyssa Marie Voss. Her niece, the only one who still sent handwritten birthday cards, who called her Auntie Lane even as an adult, who had actually shown up, after Michael's funeral with soup and silence and no expectations. "I'm making her executor," Elaine said, "and sole beneficiary." Martin looked up. "That'll make things very clean." Elaine smiled. "Clean is the goal." He tapped a few more keys. "Would you like to set up a living trust while we're here?" "Yes. Everything rolls into it: house, vehicle, retirement accounts, annuities. You'll need a new medical directive, too." "Already drafted. It's in my bag." Martin raised an eyebrow, impressed despite himself. "You're moving with precision." Elaine removed a pen from her coat pocket. "Precision is the opposite of panic." They worked quietly for the next 40 minutes. No small talk, no backstory, just signatures, notarizations, and the systematic redirection of an entire future. As Martin slid the final document across the desk for her review, he asked, not quite idly, "Do they know this is happening?" Elaine paused, then met his eyes. "They will, but not from me. Paper speaks louder than confrontation." He nodded slowly. "You don't want to warn them?" "I'm not looking for a scene. I'm looking for silence with consequences." She signed her name in 4 clean strokes. No hesitation. Martin gathered the documents into a leather-bound portfolio and handed it to her. "It's all filed, effective immediately. The trust locks your assets. The new directive overrides all prior powers of attorney. And the will, well, that'll speak for itself one day. Let's hope they read carefully." On her way out, she stopped by the receptionist's desk. "Could you print me 2 extra copies of the living trust summary and one of the medical directive?" "Of course, Ms. Voss." She folded them neatly and slid them into 2 separate envelopes, then labeled them in small, efficient letters. "For Alyssa. To be read only if contested." The late afternoon sun hit her car windshield at a slant as she climbed in. She didn't start the engine right away. Instead, she opened her planner and turned to the next blank page. Departure date: 1 week, 7 a.m. sharp. Elaine underlined it twice. She would leave like she had arrived, on her own terms, carrying her name, not theirs. As she pulled onto the street, her phone buzzed in her purse. She didn't bother checking. There was only one person she wanted to hear from today, and she had already signed her name on every single line that mattered. The envelope arrived on a Thursday. It was thick, official-looking, and stamped with a red-bordered sticker that said "Certified Mail." Signature required in bold block letters. Elaine heard the knock as she was folding a sweater into a suitcase upstairs. She didn't rush. Let them answer it. By the time she came down, Caleb was standing in the foyer, brow furrowed, envelope half open, lips slightly parted in confusion. Elaine walked past him without a word, headed toward the kitchen and poured herself a glass of water. Behind her, the sound of paper tearing, pages shifting. Silence. Then, "What the hell is this?" She didn't turn. "I imagine it says exactly what it needs to." Caleb's voice rose. "Are you evicting us? This says we have, what, 21 days to vacate?" Elaine sipped her water. "Or refinance. Your choice." Jenna came running down the stairs barefoot, holding her phone like it was a weapon. "What's going on? Caleb, what is that?" He shoved the papers toward her. "Apparently we don't own the house." Jenna snatched them and started reading. Her mouth moved without sound for a few seconds. Then her eyes flew to Elaine. "Wait, this says your name is the only one on the deed." Elaine nodded. "That's correct." "But I thought we co-signed when we moved in. You said, Caleb? You said we did." "I thought we did," Caleb snapped, but his voice faltered. I assumed—" "You assumed wrong," Elaine said, still perfectly calm. "I never transferred title, never planned to, and no, you didn't sign anything, neither of you ever asked." Jenna's face flushed deep pink. "You let me spend money on this house, paint, furniture, that kitchen remodel." Elaine raised an eyebrow. "All done without consulting me." "But we live here. We've made it ours." Elaine set the empty glass in the sink. "That was your second assumption." Caleb took a step closer. "This is a misunderstanding. You can't just kick us out of our own home." Elaine turned to him fully now. It's not your home, and this isn't a misunderstanding. It's documentation. You've got 21 days. You can refinance in your name or vacate. You think you're going to bully us with some papers? Caleb's tone sharpened, desperate. This is still family. You don't do this to family. Elaine tilted her head. Family doesn't say the wrong parent died first. That shut him up. For a moment. Jenna jumped in, her voice dripping with performative empathy. Elaine, come on. You've been grieving. We've all said things we didn't mean. Let's not do something everyone will regret. Elaine walked to the hallway closet and unlocked it with a small silver key. I'm not doing anything I'll regret. She pulled out 2 moving boxes, ones she had packed days ago, and carried them toward the garage door. One by one, she placed them gently into the back of her sedan. The trunk was already half full. Jewelry, legal documents, family photos, notebooks, her life, condensed and ready. You're actually going through with this, Caleb muttered. Elaine turned back toward him. There's nothing to go through with. It's already done. Why now? Jenna demanded. You've been staying here all this time. You never said a word. I didn't need to speak to act. She walked back to the closet and pulled the key from the office door. Michael's office, the one room they'd never dared enter until recently. She'd noticed it. The lamp moved. A file misaligned. Caleb had been snooping. Elaine locked the office, then dropped the key into her pocket. You have 21 days, she said again, her voice like iron dressed in silk. If you'd like a realtor referral, I have several. Neither of them responded. As she passed through the hallway, Jenna's voice chased her, shaky, manipulative. Elaine, what would Michael say if he saw this? Elaine stopped for half a breath, her spine straight as a ruler. Then, he'd ask, what took me so long? She kept walking. 3 days after the envelope, Caleb was pacing the living room in basketball shorts and a wrinkled, college hoodie, phone pressed to his ear, jaw clenched. His voice was just low enough for Elaine to ignore, until it wasn't. I don't understand, he snapped. We make good income. I've got, well, my freelance stuff and Jenna's W-2S. You can check. There was a pause. Elaine stirred her tea slowly in the kitchen, back turned. No cosigner. It's just us, he said. Yeah, I mean, my mother lives here, but she's leaving. Another pause. Caleb's voice dropped lower. Wait, what do you mean flagged? Elaine carried her mug outside to the back patio without a word. The autumn air had teeth now. The leaves were crisp under her shoes. The hydrangeas, once vibrant and wild under Michael's care, were browning at the edges, just like the house. She watched a squirrel dart across the fence, tail flicking, on instinct. The same instinct she'd started listening to again. Behind her, Caleb's voice grew louder. No, we were told this was a family property, that it was co-owned. Elaine sat in a wrought iron chair and took a sip of her tea. Too sweet. Jenna must have messed with the sugar jar again. She didn't turn when the sliding door opened hard enough to rattle the frame. Caleb's voice cracked. Did you list me as co-owner somewhere? Anywhere? Jenna stood behind him, arms folded tightly across her chest. You said we signed something, back when we moved in. I thought we did. You thought? She hissed. Caleb, we just got flagged for fraud on a loan application. FRAUD. Elaine raised her eyes to the tree line but said nothing. Maybe if you didn't tank our credit getting that stupid truck, Jenna snapped. He whirled on her. Oh, like your wellness coaching website ever paid a dime of the gas bill? Elaine stood and walked back inside, passing between them like they were ghosts. She went to her bedroom, closed the door gently, and pulled up her account with the gas company. Then the electric, then water, internet, trash, lawn service. One by one, she changed the billing name to hers, confirmed her identity with old security questions, and then submitted cancellation notices. 30 days, no extensions. Service would terminate whether the house was occupied or not. She took her time. By the time she was finished, Jenna was on the phone in the hallway, pacing in agitated circles. She can't actually do this, right? Like, legally? She's old. She's grieving. There has to be protections. Hello? Hello? Elaine walked past her to the laundry room and retrieved 2 more boxes, already packed. She loaded them into her car without asking for help. They watched from the window. That night, over dinner, takeout pizza Caleb had ordered but didn't pay for, Jenna made one more attempt. "Elaine," she said softly, like they were allies now, "I think we're all just emotional. Maybe we should talk. You don't really want to throw us out, we're family." Elaine looked up from her soup. "No," she said simply. "I want accountability." Caleb threw down his fork. "You've made your point." Elaine stood. I've just started." She left her empty bowl in the sink and walked out without a backward glance. That night, the internet cut out. Jenna screamed from the living room. "My Zoom call just dropped." "Elaine, what did you do?" Elaine lay in bed, lights off, listening to the chaos settle in the walls like winter wind. She opened her journal and wrote a single line. "They still believe I'll flinch." Elaine began with the photo albums. Not the big ones. They could stay. Just the small leather-bound books from before Caleb was born. Honeymoon snapshots. Her old classroom photos. Michael in his Navy uniform, half smiling under the California sun. She stacked them neatly into a banker's box lined with bubble wrap, then labeled it in black Sharpie, "Voss, personal, do not touch." The hallway smelled like tension. Jenna had sprayed one of her cloying room deodorizers, something called cashmere mist, but underneath lingered the scent of last night's argument, still clinging to the drywall. Elaine moved room to room, not hurried, not hesitant. Her hands worked like they were performing muscle memory, like the house itself was helping her let go. China she had inherited from her mother, her vinyl copy of Kind of Blue. A jewelry box Michael had made in his garage workshop back in '91. She wrapped each item like she was folding up history and packing it away, not out of sadness but clarity. She didn't touch anything that wasn't hers, but she touched everything that was. On the 3rd day, Caleb finally cracked. He knocked on her bedroom door, not hard, not soft, just enough to let her know he needed something. Elaine didn't open it. "You can speak from the hall. Can we talk? His voice drifted, hesitant. "We're trying, but it's moving fast. Jenna's worried. I'm worried." Elaine opened the door halfway. She wore her navy cardigan, the one Michael always said made her look like someone who read legal thrillers for sport. "I've already told you the date," she said, "and you've had the paperwork for over a week. This isn't fast. It's simply punctual. You don't need to do it this way." "No," she said, voice calm. "But I'm choosing to." He blinked. "You're really not going to give us more time?" Elaine didn't sigh, didn't soften. "You've had years of time, Caleb. You just didn't think it would run out." She closed the door gently. That afternoon she booked the movers. 1 truck, 1 day. Her new short-term lease began that Friday. 3rd floor, corner unit, no stairs, lots of light. She'd already gone to see it. She didn't need a tour. Back in her room, she opened her laptop and created a spreadsheet. 2 years of itemized expenses, mortgage, utilities, home maintenance, groceries, medical bills, car repairs, internet, insurance, all listed with dates and payment amounts. Every line came with proof. The total at the bottom hovered just above $82,000. She attached the file to an email. The subject line was simple: "For your records, household contributions." She BCC'd it to herself and clicked send. Jenna came home later, voice brittle with anxiety, and found Elaine in the garage, labeling a box of framed prints. "We've been looking at Airbnbs," she said quickly, "but it's hard. Most places don't allow long stays without background checks, and our credit—" Elaine didn't pause. "That sounds like a challenge." Jenna's expression cracked. "Can't you just give us an extra month? 1?" Elaine sealed the box. "No." Jenna's mouth twitched. "You're really going to do this to your own son?" Elaine looked up. He did it to himself. The words weren't angry. They were just accurate. That night, she found a single sock on the kitchen table. Caleb's. Inside was a crumpled dollar bill and a pair of used earbuds. As she picked it up, something deep in her chest, something that had been dormant for years, finally exhaled. She tossed the sock into the trash. Later, alone in her locked room, she opened her planner and crossed off 4 more boxes. Tomorrow was the storage pickup. Thursday was the utilities callback. Friday, she'd pick up her new keys. And Saturday, the movers. From the other side of the house, muffled but sharp. "Maybe she's bluffing," Caleb muttered. Elaine smiled. She picked up her pen and added a line to her checklist. Bluff equals broken. The first thing to go was the internet. Jenna noticed it just before her 9 a.m. coaching call. One click, then a spinning wheel. Refresh. Refresh again. "Elaine," she called into the hallway. "The Wi-Fi's out. Did you reset the router?" Silence. Jenna rolled her eyes, grabbed her phone, and saw the no service icon mocking her in the upper corner. She turned it off and back on. Nothing. Downstairs, Caleb opened the fridge and noticed the soft flicker from the light bulb overhead, dimmer than usual. He pressed the water dispenser. Nothing came out. He opened the tap at the kitchen sink. A hollow groan, then a gasp of air. He stormed to Elaine's bedroom and flung the door open. Empty. The bed made. The room stripped of anything personal. Closet doors open and bare, drawers neatly closed, floor vacuumed. There was only a folded sheet of printer paper on the pillow, weighted by the house key. Caleb snatched it up and read, "You're the man of the house now. Evie." He crumpled it in his fist. "Jenna!" he shouted. "She's gone!" From the hallway. "Gone where?" "All her stuff. Gone. She left." The front door was already locked from the outside, the kind of click that signals something final. Downstairs on the kitchen counter sat a folder labeled in neat black ink, "Final Notices, Utilities." Inside were the cancellation confirmations, account numbers, and exact termination dates: water, electric, internet, gas, waste disposal. No service extensions allowed. All accounts legally closed under Elaine's name. Jenna stood over it, blinking. She actually did it. Caleb's phone buzzed, a blocked number. He answered on instinct. "Hello?" A clipped voice on the other end. "This is Rebecca Grant from Blue Sky Realty. I'm calling to schedule a walkthrough of the Meadowview Lane property. Ms. Elaine Voss authorized the listing if payment wasn't resumed by October 1st. We'd like to come by next Tuesday." He felt the floor shift under him. No, you can't. She can't sell the house. I live here." "Sir," the agent said, politely detached, "according to the title records, you do not. This call is a courtesy." The line went dead. He threw the phone across the room. Jenna stood at the sink trying to run water that no longer flowed. "What do we do?" "Call her." He dialed. A single ring, then, "The number you have dialed is no longer in service." Jenna tried her phone. Same result. By noon, Caleb had resorted to emailing her. Subject line, "Can we talk?" He wrote, "We didn't mean what we said. We just want to work it out. Please don't do this." He hit send. On the other side of town, in a warm, sunlit apartment, Elaine saw the message come through. She didn't open it. She archived it into a folder she'd already named, "Closure Attempts." Then she brewed herself a cup of chamomile and walked to the window. Outside, the trees were beginning to show their first real blush of fall, deep orange, rust red, the kind of beauty that only came from letting go at the right time. She sat down, crossed her legs, and opened her journal. Her pen moved quietly across the page. "They never asked what I needed, only what I could offer." That evening, back on Meadowview Lane, the sun dipped early and left the house in a gray hush. No light, no water, no Wi-Fi, and no mother to fix it. The lights never came back on, the water stayed off. The fridge was a mausoleum of spoiled leftovers, sour almond milk and limp spinach. Jenna lit candles and pretended it was temporary, but Caleb had stopped pretending. He spent his days on job sites that never called back and nights scrolling job boards on borrowed Wi-Fi from the neighbor's porch. One rejection after another. A few interviews, but nothing stuck. The last recruiter was blunt. "Resumes scattered, gaps, and we called your old supervisor, said you ghosted a client mid-project." "I had a family emergency," Caleb replied, voice tightening. "They said it was a bowling league." Click. Jenna fared no better. She'd already been on thin ice at the wellness studio. 3 no-shows in 1 week. The final straw came when she showed up 22 minutes late with greasy hair and yesterday's makeup still smudged under her eyes. "I'm in a transitional space," she'd explained. "So is your employment," her boss had said, handing her the termination form. Back at Meadowview, credit card statements piled like leaves on the entryway floor. The overdraft fees bloomed like mold. Caleb tried paying the mortgage, once. The card bounced. Then the backup card. Jenna had one left, but it was tied to her old Etsy shop, long dead and flagged for late shipments. They stopped answering phone calls with unfamiliar area codes. That was the beginning of the spiral. By mid-October, Caleb had pawned his smartwatch, his Bluetooth speakers, and finally the gaming console he swore he'd never sell. Jenna tried selling homemade body scrubs online, but the website kept crashing, and she couldn't figure out how to connect it to her Venmo. Then, one afternoon, sitting in the darkened living room, wrapped in a blanket like a discarded houseguest, Jenna had an idea. She Venmo requested Elaine. $20, paper towels, household share. Elaine saw the notification while waiting in line at her favorite corner bakery. She was picking up a small apple tart and a loaf of fresh rosemary bread. Simple pleasures, paid in full and guilt-free. She opened the app, stared at the request. No message, no explanation, just the bolded figure. $20 for paper towels. She didn't respond. She took a screenshot. Then she added it to a folder on her desktop titled Receipts. That night she opened her planner, drew a thin black line across the page, and wrote beneath it, "Dignity can't be invoiced." Meanwhile, back on Meadowview Lane, the mail kept coming. Most of it junk, some of it warnings, then the one they couldn't ignore. A large white envelope from First United Bank. Subject line, "Notice of intent to initiate pre-foreclosure proceedings." Jenna opened it first. Her fingers trembled. Caleb, we're defaulting. The bank's moving in." Caleb ran a hand through his hair. "They can't just take it. Elaine gave them permission." He didn't reply. She tossed the letter onto the coffee table, now a graveyard of unopened bills and hollow candle jars. "We're going to lose everything," she whispered. "No," Caleb said. But the word was hollow, more habit than belief. Outside, the sun dipped early again, and the house settled into its now familiar darkness. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was loaded, like a fuse waiting for flame. In her apartment across town, Elaine slipped into flannel pajamas, clicked on her bedside lamp, and opened her journal. Tonight's entry was just 2 words, interest accrued. Elaine's new apartment smelled like lemonwood polish and fresh paint, not lavender plug-ins or air fresheners named after imaginary fabrics, real scent, earned clean. It was a corner unit on the 3rd floor, plenty of sunlight in the morning and blissfully quiet at night. No footsteps overhead, no television bleeding through the walls, just her breath, the occasional creak of the floorboards, and the low murmur of the city existing outside her window. She'd brought only what mattered, a few framed photos, Michael's armchair, her collection of hardcover mysteries, and the blue Le Creuset Dutch oven they got on their 20th anniversary. Everything else, furniture, linens, wall art, she'd chosen herself this time. All soft grays, warm whites, nothing with florals. The place felt light, airy, uncluttered, like her mind. She spent her mornings walking to the bake, right down the block. No rush, just rhythm. The clerk already knew her order. Black coffee, no room, and a cranberry scone if it was Tuesday. She always paid in cash. Always smiled. No one called her Mom. No one asked her what was for dinner. On Thursdays, she attended the Eastside Readers Group at the community library. They read everything from Toni Morrison to Tana French, and no one interrupted her when she spoke. She didn't talk much, but when she did, people listened. Alyssa visited most weekends, always bringing something small, maple butter, lavender soap, a loaf of banana bread she insisted needed critiquing. They'd sit together in the new kitchen, chopping vegetables, sipping wine, telling truths. No masks, no negotiations, just the clean, honest rhythm of 2 women who understood what it meant to be underestimated and what it meant to outgrow that entirely. "You seem full," Alyssa said once. Not in a sad way. Like something's clicked back into place. Elaine smiled, slicing an onion. I think I just ran out of room for noise. She hadn't spoken to Caleb or Jenna since the bank notice, not once. But their voices still tried to find her. A letter had arrived that afternoon, addressed in Jenna's bubbly cursive. The return address was still Meadowview Lane, though for how long, Elaine wasn't sure. She didn't open it. She simply walked it over to the small metal tray on her bookshelf, labeled with a single piece of masking tape. When They Learn. It sat on top of 3 others, 1 from Caleb, 2 from Jenna, all unopened. Elaine didn't need to know what was inside. Regret had a scent, and it never arrived in time. That night, after Alyssa left and the apartment was still again, Elaine lit a single candle on the kitchen counter. She sat at her desk by the window and opened her journal. She didn't write about loss. She wrote about the new neighbor across the hall who wore mismatched socks and always held the elevator. She wrote about the pecan tart she'd tried last weekend and the way the light hit the hardwood around 4 p.m. She wrote about a novel she wanted to read again, this time slowly. Her handwriting was the same as it had always been, tight, slanted, with sharp points on every capital E, but her tone had changed. It wasn't revenge she felt now, it was return. As she capped her pen, she heard her phone buzz softly. Another email, another plea. She didn't open that either, but this time she didn't archive it right away. She let it sit. And then she stood, walked to the window, and watched as the moon carved out quiet angles in the city below. In the morning, she'd bake something. And not for anyone else. The courthouse smelled like dry paper and recycled air. Too cold for a fall morning, but it matched the room's mood. Room 3B, Civil Division. Dockets back to back. Nothing personal, just process. Elaine sat 3 rows from the front, second seat in. Charcoal coat, gloves folded neatly in her lap, large black sunglasses veiled her eyes, but her posture told the truth, upright, composed, invisible by choice. Caleb and Jenna sat near the front, fidgeting. He wore a blazer that didn't quite fit, shoulders too tight. She was in beige, makeup heavier than usual, lips pressed together like punctuation. They hadn't spoken since entering the courtroom. The judge, Honorable Maria Ingram, entered, robe crisp, expression neutral. She didn't look tired, she looked practiced. Case number 1786 CV, Voss Property, Meadowview Lane, Bank of First United versus current residents. Elaine remained still. She didn't flinch when their names were read. Caleb rose with a half-step forward. Your Honor, if I may, my wife and I would like to formally request a 30-day extension on the foreclosure proceedings. We weren't given proper time to respond. Judge Ingram blinked once. Mr. Voss, the notice was served 6 weeks ago. Certified mail. The court has receipt. You had ample opportunity to respond before default. We've had financial setbacks, Jenna chimed in, voice tight with effort. Job loss, health stress. We just need time to get back on our feet. The judge looked down at her file, flipping 2 pages with a quick flick of her fingers. According to the lender's affidavit, you've made no payments in 4 months. The utilities have been off for 2. You are not listed on the deed or mortgage. Jenna opened her mouth, but Caleb placed a hand on her arm. Please, he said, it's our home. Judge Ingram looked up. No, she said. It isn't. Silence rolled through the courtroom. Elaine sat without blinking. She'd already reviewed the docket online, already confirmed her name wouldn't be called. The bank had taken over. She was just an observer now. The judge continued. Foreclosure is approved. Bank is authorized to proceed with sale and vacancy filing. The house will be listed within 10 business days. Gavel. Sharp. Final. The sound echoed. Caleb stood frozen, blinking hard. Jenna stared at the judge like she was still waiting for the kindness part. It never came. They turned and walked down the aisle in stiff silence. They didn't look back. They didn't see her. Elaine sat perfectly still as they passed, close enough to touch, but she didn't move, didn't breathe. Her coat brushed Caleb's sleeve, and still he didn't notice. The door swung open and they were gone. She waited a moment longer, then stood. She moved with quiet, deliberate grace toward the exit. Her heels didn't click. They whispered. At the door she paused, hand on the worn metal bar. Outside the wind had picked up. The sky had that late fall color, too bright to be gray, too heavy to be blue. She stepped into it, the courthouse doors shutting behind her like the close of a vault. In her bag was a folded printout of the listing agreement, already pre-signed. The realtor would go live next week. The pictures would look lovely, even with the lights off. And in her pocket, tucked behind her phone, was a photo of the house from the early years. Sunlit, green-lawned, Michael standing out front with a rake in one hand and a coffee in the other. Elaine didn't look at it now. She didn't need to. The notification pinged just after sunrise. Caleb, again. A text this time. "Can we talk? Just once?" Elaine stared at the screen for a beat, then swiped left, tapped info, and scrolled down. Block this caller. Confirm. Done. She repeated the process with Jenna's number. Then, with a small exhale through her nose, she added a third, Jenna's mother, who had recently started leaving voicemails about restoring family unity and doing what's Christian. Elaine added her to the list. Not out of malice. Out of finality. Some voices simply didn't get to reach you anymore. Later that morning, she walked 3 blocks to the Midtown Community Resource Center, a red brick building tucked between a barber shop and a quiet Mexican bakery. Inside, the conference room buzzed with low chatter and folding chairs scraping across linoleum. Elaine had been invited to speak at a financial literacy event for women over 50. The flyer said, "Secure your future, lessons in ownership and boundaries." She wore her slate gray slacks and a pale blue sweater that matched her eyes exactly. Hair brushed back, not curled. No lipstick, just clarity. When she stepped to the front of the room, the talking stopped. She took her time looking around. Dozens of women in secondhand coats and expensive glasses and church hats and gym sneakers. Survivors of marriages, of jobs that didn't love them back, of children who never came home when they promised they would. Elaine smiled once, soft, not warm. Then she began. "I'm not here to tell you how to get revenge," she said. "I'm here to tell you how to get your name back on the deed." Light laughter. A few nods. One woman whispered amen under her breath. She talked about wills, about utility accounts, about power of attorney and how silence was often interpreted as surrender. She spoke plainly, without fluff. When someone asked how long it took to get her peace back, she said, "As long as it took me to remember, I never owed anyone my ruin." At the end, she handed out printed packets from a manila envelope titled, "What You Still Own." Inside were templates, checklists, and highlighted warnings, but the first page held only a single sentence in 14-point bold. If they can't pay the bills, they don't get to make the rules. Afterward, several women lingered. A retired nurse from Wichita hugged her tightly. A younger widow asked if they could get coffee sometime. A woman named Teresa, fluent in spreadsheets but not boundaries, asked if she could adapt the packet for her church group. Elaine said yes to all of it. By the time she left the center, the afternoon sun was low and gold. The wind whipped her coat as she crossed the parking lot, and for once she didn't button it. Let the breeze find her. She had nothing left to hide. At home, she logged into her bank account and made a quiet, deliberate donation to the Women's Legal Initiative Fund, $5,000, anonymous. Under Reason for Donation, she typed, "For every woman who still thinks it's too late." That night, she didn't journal. She didn't need to. Some days didn't need to be processed, they just needed to be lived. As she sat on the couch with a bowl of lentil stew and her latest library novel, her phone buzzed one last time. This one was a new number. Unknown. She didn't check it. She just turned the phone off entirely. And in the dark, quiet glow of her apartment, Elaine smiled. Some silences weren't empty. They were earned. It was raining when the call came through to the front desk. Elaine was slicing a pear in her kitchen, listening to Ella Fitzgerald play low through her Bluetooth speaker. She didn't hear the building manager's phone ring, didn't see the blurred figure outside on the security feed pacing under the awning, damp hair plastered to his forehead. Only when her buzzer sounded did she pause. A gentle knock followed by the soft crackle of the intercom. "Ms. Voss? There's a Caleb Voss here asking to speak with you. Says he's your son. Should I?" Elaine pressed the button once. "Please let him know I'm unavailable. No messages will be accepted." A beat of static silence. Then, understood. She returned to the pear, finished slicing, finished chewing. No shake in her hands, no rise in her chest. Just the rhythmic sound of rain against the window and the clean, deliberate click of her knife on ceramic. The next morning, the building's concierge handed her a manila envelope, certified mail. Return address scribbled in Caleb's uneven print. Inside was a typed letter, only 3 lines, and a personal check for $1,000. In the memo line it read, "Partial repayment for household expenses." Elaine didn't read the rest. She didn't need to. She placed the envelope on the kitchen counter, then shredded it. First the letter, then the check. The teeth of the shredder made no distinction between apology and transaction. Paper was paper. She emptied the bin without ceremony, tied the bag, and walked it down to the trash chute. An hour later, her phone buzzed again. Alyssa this time, a quick check-in, a recipe swap, a laugh about nothing in particular. They made plans for a weekend trip to the botanical gardens. Elaine added it to her calendar in neat blue ink. She didn't mention the visit, or the letter, or the check. By Sunday afternoon, Jenna had taken her grievances public. A Facebook post, long and theatrical, was shared with a cropped photo of the house and a caption that read, "When your mother-in-law steals your home and your husband's inheritance and calls it empowerment. Watch your elders, folks." The comment section bloomed. Some offered sympathy. Others asked questions. One woman posted screenshots of Jenna's old Etsy complaints. Another linked to the foreclosure records, still active on the county website. A distant cousin chimed in, "Didn't she live there rent-free for 2 years?" Within hours the post was locked, then deleted. Elaine saw none of it firsthand, only learned about it through a neighbor who'd heard the gossip from someone at church. "She's making herself look foolish," the neighbor said with a smirk. "Don't worry, nobody's buying it." Elaine wasn't worried. She was baking. That night she opened her journal, not the public one with quotes and quiet reflections, but the private one, the one she didn't let even Alyssa see. She turned to a fresh page. In her practiced pointed script, she wrote, "I chose peace and priced it fairly." Then she shut the book, turned off the lamp, and let the dark wrap around her without fear. Outside, thunder cracked low on the horizon. Elaine smiled in the dark. Let them knock. This door was built to stay shut. Elaine stood at the edge of the walkway leading up to the house on Walnut and 7th, hands in the deep pockets of her coat as the morning sun angled across the white-painted siding. The sold sign still clung to the front lawn, tilted slightly from last night's wind, but the paperwork was final, the funds cleared, and the deed, finally, was in her name alone. No co-signers, no unseen hands, no one waiting to call it theirs after she was gone. She'd paid in cash, the entire purchase funded by the sale of Meadowview Lane, minus taxes, closing costs, and a comfortable slice set aside for emergencies. The profit hadn't been obscene, but it had been enough. Enough to buy her new piece, and enough to build something that would never again be taken for granted. The house was modest but full of potential, a quiet 2-story craftsman with soft green shutters and a solid porch. It had stood empty for years, used by the city as short-term housing, then quietly forgotten when funding dried up. But its bones were good. Elaine could feel that the moment she stepped inside during the first walkthrough. The floorboards creaked in honest places. The walls held the hush of old stories waiting for new ones. There was no noise, no clutter of ego or false charm. It felt ready for her and for what came next. Over the course of 8 weeks, she oversaw every repair and renovation herself. She hired local women contractors when she could, asking for references and offering honest pay. She chose neutral paint colors with warmth in them, not the stark grays Jenna once called modern, and had the windows widened slightly in the common areas to catch the morning light. Nothing extravagant, but everything purposeful. Practical flooring, sturdy fixtures, wide doorways, and a reading room with thick rugs and good lamps. When it was finished, she converted the space into a 3-unit senior co-op, just as she'd planned. Private living quarters upstairs, a shared kitchen and garden below. She called it the Grove, after her favorite tree in the backyard, the one with thick roots and branches that bent, never broke. Her first tenant, Marie Delaney, moved in just after Thanksgiving. A 74-year-old widow with a sharp mind and tired hands, Marie had lived with her son's family for 3 years after her husband died, until, as she explained gently, her presence became inconvenient. When Elaine handed her the keys, Marie took them with both hands, as if the metal needed warming. Her eyes welled quietly, no theatrics, just the sort of relief that comes after a long stretch of being politely unwanted. "You don't know what this means," she whispered. Elaine met her gaze with steady kindness. "I do." The rooms filled quickly after that. 2 more residents joined, Dorothy, who still taught community painting classes on Tuesdays, and Lucinda, a retired librarian who brought her own tea kettle and insisted on morning tea at exactly 9:30. Elaine walked through the finished rooms often, not out of control but reverence. She checked the windows, fluffed the pillows in the reading room, restocked the candy jar at the welcome table. Each detail had a rhythm now, each wall held intention. On one especially quiet afternoon, with Marie out in the garden and the others napping or reading, Elaine returned to the small private office she kept at the back of the house. Not for administration, she wasn't running a business, but for herself, a landing space. A room with a single armchair, a writing desk, and one final moving box she had not yet opened. Inside was Michael's vinyl collection, still alphabetized, still wrapped in their plastic sleeves with handwritten notes tucked inside some of the covers. She hadn't opened the box since Meadowview, not because she wasn't ready, but because she wanted the next place they played to be hers. Truly hers. She placed the small turntable gently on the shelf, plugged it into the wall, and selected Coltrane's A Love Supreme. As the first notes spilled softly from the speaker, something in her chest loosened. Not pain, not even nostalgia, but a long-held breath finally released. She sat cross-legged on the rug and let the music fill the space, not loudly, just enough to touch each wall like water finding its edges. Michael had once scribbled a note to her on the back of an old grocery receipt. "Play something loud when the walls are finally yours." She smiled as she remembered it, eyes glinting in the warm afternoon light. The house, the music, the quiet, all of it now hers. But not just to keep, to share, with intention. The Grove wasn't a monument to revenge. It was an answer to erasure. A place where no one would be asked to disappear quietly. A place where roots could regrow. Elaine reached for the next record. Tomorrow she'd hang the framed photo of her and Michael above the fireplace. Tonight she would listen. And for once, there would be no knock at the door. The light came in through the east-facing window just after 6. Elaine had already been awake, not from restlessness, but routine. Her body knew mornings now in a different way, not as obligation, not as a sprint, but as invitation. Another page, another clean white sky. She sat at her desk in the corner of her apartment, a cup of black tea cooling slowly beside her. The pages of her journal were already open, the pen resting in the dip of the spine like it had been waiting for her return. She smoothed the paper with both hands before she began. Final entry. She didn't need to say it aloud. It was understood in the quietness of the moment, in the way the city outside was just beginning to stir. Buses sighing at stoplights, a dog barking once from the courtyard below. All of it soft, all of it far. The pen moved steadily across the page, her handwriting calm, angled. It still stings sometimes. That's the part no one tells you. You don't walk away untouched. Not from grief, not from betrayal, not from the kind of love that turns on you slowly, like a tide you swore was retreating. But the sting fades. every sunrise is a little antiseptic. You don't forget, but you stop reopening the same wound looking for answers. She paused, not to think but to feel. A lot of people think revenge is loud, that it's fire or screaming or something cinematic. But what I did, it wasn't revenge. It was enforcement of boundaries, of value, of memory. I didn't burn down the house. I walked out, locked the door, and handed the keys back to the architect. She sipped her tea. It had gone lukewarm, but she didn't mind. There's a lie women are told. That silence is strength, that being the bigger person means shrinking yourself. But I've learned that silence, when chosen, not imposed, isn't surrender. It's a boundary with teeth. Outside, someone passed on the sidewalk, humming a tune she couldn't place. A few birds darted past the window and disappeared behind the neighboring rooftop. She kept writing. I loved them. That's the hardest part to explain to people who only see the ending. I loved Caleb. I even loved Jenna in a way. I loved the idea that we were building something shared, but love is not a receipt you can wave in front of unpaid debt. It doesn't cancel disrespect. It doesn't erase what's been stolen. She flipped to the next page, took her time. There was no rush anymore. Michael used to say I was the strongest person he knew. I used to roll my eyes and tell him I was just stubborn. Now I realize he wasn't wrong. Strength isn't what carries weight. It's what releases it when it no longer serves you. Her fingers slowed as she neared the end. I'm not an antique. I'm a fortress. Weather-worn, yes, but reinforced. Occupied. Secure. The cost of entry is respect, and not everyone can afford the mortgage. She looked up for a long moment, eyes catching the pale blue of the sky beyond the glass. Then she added the last lines. Caleb thought his sentence, the one he spat at me across our dinner table, would break something permanent. The wrong parent died first. He said it like a door slamming. What he never understood was that grief, real grief, doesn't make you weak. It makes you exact. And now, he's paying in full. There was no malice in the words, only accounting. She drew a small check mark in the corner of the page. One of Michael's habits. She'd picked it up after he passed, quietly, like a borrowed coat. And then she wrote her last sentence. Turns out I wasn't the one who needed saving. Elaine capped the pen, closed the journal, and pressed her palm against the cover for a breath longer than usual. Then she stood, poured what remained of the tea into the sink, and opened the window wide to let the morning all the way in.